And together we want to give you something really practical to walk away with. And hopefully by the end of the session, you will have a concrete step-by-step approach that lets you walk into your next meeting with your CEO and say yes to AI adoption on your terms with the right controls in place. So before we dive in, I just wanted to note that you can ask questions anytime. There's a little question mark icon to the bottom right of your screen, I think. So you can ask questions directly to me, Neil and I, or you can send it through chat. We'll capture that. We also have a couple of polls that's going to run during our session. So would love your participation there. Session itself will be recorded and you will be receiving a replay if you would like to review things. So let's get started, Neil. So to understand why this conversation is so urgent, let's look at what's happening at the executive level. The pressure is real. So AI is no longer just a tech conversation. It's kind of a business survival conversation. Before this session, we did a little bit of research through S&P 500 earnings calls. And of all of them, in recent Q4 last year, there were 331 citations of AI. So CEOs talking about AI transformation within their companies. According to the Boston Consulting Group, half of CEOs believe their job is on the line if AI doesn't deliver the results this year. And so this is the type of pressure that your leadership team is feeling right now. And next slide, we're hearing it from the biggest names in tech. So the Jensen Huang at NVIDIA isn't just saying AI is important, but he's explicitly telling companies that their employees need to be using it more. Mark Benioff at Salesforce is telling customers they need to transform into agentic enterprises. And within Salesforce itself, he said that somewhere between 30 and 50% of work across the teams is now being done by AI. So many of you have been in IT long enough, or security, IT long enough to have lived through lots of different technological shifts. There's been cloud mandates, mobile first mandates, digital transformation. You know what it looks like when leadership gets excited about something and expects you to make it safe and real. But I think most of you would agree that AI, this is happening very differently. The pace is different, the stakes feel much higher, and I think employees are driving this adoption. And this time, IT, they're not waiting for IT to lead the way. So before we dig in, let's illustrate just how this dynamic plays out inside a company. I want to introduce you to a couple of characters you may already recognize. Allow me to introduce another CEO. Actually, he's more of a regional manager, but we'll give him the CEO title today, who is feeling the AI imperative. Meet Michael Scott, with his Mac Mini OpenClaw server in hand, declaring with full confidence and not a whole lot of context, I declare we're an AI-first company. And we've all met the CEO. Maybe we work for him or her. And honestly, as frustrating as it can be, he's not entirely wrong. Then there's our CISO, meet Dwight Schrute, beet farmer turned paper salesman, who he looks at agentic AI and sees, I'm quoting here, a multi-headed fire beast. Its limbs are agents, its claws are MCP tools, its teeth are a cold disregard for policies and compliance, which also not entirely wrong. And so the tension between these two characters is exactly what we're here to help you navigate today. And the truth is they're both reacting to something real, and your job is to find a path that honors both of their concerns. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Neil, who's going to give us the context we need to understand how we got here, the timeline matters, all of that matters. So Neil, take us through it.
Awesome. Thanks, Vivian. So Michael, our CEO, he might seem like he's just jumping on the AI hype bandwagon, but he's actually onto something. You know, after the breakthrough release of ChatGPT back in 2022, and contemporaries like Gemini and Copilot. Leading into 2024, there was a lot of speculation about what the impact AI would have on businesses. But a lot of what we saw was developer-led adoption. There was a new generation of coding tools that came out, spreading like wildfire: Cursor, Windsurf, Zed, and AI systems were being baked in the IDEs that your devs use, like Visual Studio. And by the tail end of 2024, the MCP specification was published by Anthropic. And I'm not sure if you remember this, but who was most excited by this? And like, what were the first use cases of MCP that we saw getting built? They were really just tools for developers. And so, being a developer myself, I was a bit surprised as to what brought on a serious change. And in 2025, what was was definitively the year of the agent. Everything was agentified, and it was quite a breakout year for MCP. In fact, I'm going to say that there was quite an explosion. And there are two reasons why I think MCP just went ballistic in 2025. First, it was a standard that emerged, and pretty much every tool that was out there adopted it. Like, pretty much every leading tool had some kind of way, shape, or form to add MCP connectivity to it. And the second reason I think that MCP just went crazy in 2025 is because of AI-powered coding tools. They're just getting better and easier to use. So integrations with MCP just became astronomically faster and easier to build if something wasn't built already. So toward the tail end of last year in 2025, non-engineering knowledge workers started realizing that the tools that developers were using, like Claude Code, could also be used for their work. And if they needed to connect to an external system, an app, connect an app into the AI tools to get some more work done, they could just install or connect to MCP servers themselves.
Great. And Neil, I just wanted to underscore for this audience, because I think this is what you just said is a point that a lot of IT leaders are missing. It's not that employees are trying to circumvent security, but they've just found a faster path to getting their work done. And so similar to how Dropbox kind of exploded before they had file sharing solution, they had this very viral user-led growth model. And so I think this there's some
absolutely
connection here.
No, for sure. It wasn't to try to circumvent anything. It was just trying to, hop on the bandwagon themselves and not be left behind. Really, right? And that brought us into this year, 2026, where we saw things like the meteoric rise of OpenClaw, right? That open source agentic platform gives a lot of control to the end user. People got super excited about it. It broke like all kinds of records in terms of GitHub open source repositories and popularity and downloads. Anthropic launched Claude Cowork, which was basically Claude Code, but for knowledge workers. It gave the same kinds of tools that devs had, or the abilities to give access to local folders and files. And unbeknownst to a lot of IT and security folks, it also made it super easy to connect dozens of SaaS apps with just a couple of mouse clicks. So today, all types of knowledge workers are getting inspired by the possibilities of what agentic AI can do. And every day we read more and more stories about how non-engineering knowledge workers are building advanced and proactive, agentic teams to help them become more effective and to get things done async. And frankly, they're doing this not just to be more productive, but also to remain competitive and relevant in the workforce.
Yep. All right. So this takes us to our first poll, which I'm going to publish right now. Hopefully you guys can see it on the screen. This is the first time we're doing this. So the question is, 65% of employees are doing this at work without telling IT. What is it? So pick the one that you think is the correct answer. Is it ordering lunch on company Wi-Fi without using the VPN? Is it using 2 or more AI tools without IT approval? Have fallen asleep during an AI compliance training video? Text on their phone during an all-hands meeting? So please submit your poll answer.
All right. I'm going to reveal the answer.
Cool. Okay, everyone. y'all got it right. So congratulations. If this were live, I would throw out some prizes, but we're virtual. So you're right. So 65% of employees are regularly using 2 or more AI tools without IT approval. And they are doing this regularly. This actually came from a research survey report that Barndoor just recently published a couple months back. Next slide, Neil. So when you're looking at what they're actually doing with these tools, it does get more specific and more concerning. So Neil was talking about how this AI adoption is now transitioning to be much more knowledge worker led. And so our research report found that these are what knowledge workers are doing. Half of the employees that we surveyed have given AI tools persistent access to internal systems. Nearly 80% of them say that they work under no real AI policies at their company. And almost 30% are already using what we would classify as agentic AI, which means that tools that aren't just answering questions through a chat window, but their AI is actually taking actions on their behalf. And so, like we mentioned, your knowledge workers or employees, they're not doing this with any malicious intent. They're not trying to circumvent security. They're just trying to do their jobs faster. And the way they're doing it is creating a broader risk exposure. And so, someone in sales could upload a confidential PDF to ChatGPT or Claude to help them prep for a meeting. Someone in finance may share margin data with Claude to help draft a summary. Again, they're not trying to break the rules because in most cases, there are no rules. They're just trying to fill a gap. And with that vacuum, that gap between what employees are doing and what IT knows about, that's where the risk is happening. And so you probably have seen a lot of this in your social media feeds or in news headlines, as AI adoption broadens and it's growing fast, the empowerment of knowledge workers is really exciting. And people are building things, they're automating things, they're getting more work done. But they're also, they're vibe coding their own agents and integrations without policies, without guardrails, without IT visibility, without governance. And some of that can lead to bad consequences, as we've articulated here in this slide. Again, not because they meant to cause harm, but because they had access and they had the ability and no one was watching. And that's the world that we're in right now. And exactly why the framework that Neil is going to walk you through in the upcoming slides, it's why it matters. So, before we get there, we have another poll for you. So Neil, let me launch this poll here.
Yeah, sure. Does anyone know what this 20,000 number stands for? Any guesses? It has to do with the world of AI. Maybe I'll also participate in this poll.
Did I launch it yet? Oh, no, not yet. Okay, here I just launched it.
So is it the number of Lego pieces in the Millennium Falcon set? The number of MCP servers available today? Unread emails in Neil's inbox. Darn it, who has access to my Gmail MCP? And cups of coffee consumed at Anthropic last year. Oh boy, there's probably more than one correct answer here, including the third one, but I'm going to submit my answer. Boy, that's not right. That is not
you
right.
Probably have the Millennium Falcon set, right?
Yeah, sure. And I probably do have 20,000 unread emails. So it is the number of MCP servers.
Everyone got that right.
When MCP became a spec in November 24, there were about 100 MCP servers out in the wild that kind of, that people were that you could kind of account for. Today, it's north of 20,000. And talking to other folks in the industry, it's probably actually much higher than that. But that's about the number that we see of public MCP servers, as well as maybe some derivatives that you might find on GitHub. This hyper growth and adoption of MCP is not a fluke. And the demand isn't just coming from developers anymore. Even though I'm a developer, I would like to think that most of it comes from us. I think most of it now is coming from R&D, the knowledge workers. And I can say that like that last slide that we showed with all of those vulnerabilities, a lot of those are coming because I think a lot of people are just adopting MCP servers and making these integrations, willy-nilly and just trying them out. And what do you know? Like some of the things that they're connecting to are just ripe for exfiltration and being hacked. And a lot of these tools are just being built and are available like one-click install, or they can build them themselves because the code generation tools are just getting so powerful. And if you don't believe me that knowledge workers are leading this, just head over to Reddit and GitHub and you can see it for yourself.
Yeah.
So it actually turns out that our CEO and CISO are both right. CEOs are just trying to stay ahead of the innovation curve, keep their company competitive in this rapidly changing landscape, and CISOs are just trying to stay ahead of all the threats and that all this innovation is bringing along with it. So before we jump into the framework for adopting agentic AI safely, I just want to be honest about something, and that your vendors probably aren't going to tell you these things. And the first thing is that your identity access system management system is just not enough. It does a great job for authenticating like who's logging in, but it has nothing to say about what an AI agent does after it gets in. Identity truly stops at the door, but that agent just keeps going.
Yeah, and I think that really hits hard among the CISOs that we talk to, because they think that because they have IDP lined up, that they're covered and they're very invested in it until they realize that this with AI and agents, it's just a whole other layer of activity that their identity provider just doesn't cover. But I also want to note that a lot of them think that with agentic governance, somehow they need to re-implement or rip and replace their identity provider, which isn't the case. So, Neil, I was wondering, can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. I mean, identity definitely plays a role. The thing is, as I mentioned earlier, it's just identity. So, like with agentic AI, the context is key. And so you spent 20 years perfecting the who and the what with IDPs and IAMs. Agentic AI introduces the questions of why and how. So your IAM knows like, hey, it's Vivian, but doesn't know that Vivian's agent is suddenly requesting like a bulk export of the company's compensation table, which leads me to my next bullet, which is around data loss prevention tools. They're watching for files being exfiltrated. DLP wasn't designed to inspect LLM context windows or catch a tool call that's quietly reading Salesforce data record by record, field by field, because it's not traditional. It's not a traditional exfiltration event. It's just an employee or an agent having a conversation with a model. So if your employee was doing all of this in a vacuum, your data would not be exfiltrated. But the reality is that when it comes to conversations with LLMs, the model has access to tools like we talked about earlier, and those tools probably aren't sanctioned or governed all the time. And lastly, vibe coding today is very different than it was just a year ago. I'm a software engineer by education and trade, and I'm blown away by like how powerful these tools are. But now all workers have the ability to run apps, build and run apps, agents, and even MCP servers. And they're often hard to detect, especially now with new MCP servers and apps that are designed to actually behave like humans. They drive browser sessions, they click on buttons, they fill out forms to actually try to evade being detected as a bot. And so, stepping back, this isn't a criticism of existing tools and systems we have in place. They were built for a world where humans were the only actors in our systems. What we know now, though, is that that world is definitely over.
Yeah, and I think that that sentence should be like its own webinar in a way, or
Sure.
separate conversation, because so much of the tooling and the policies and the models that we rely on, they were all built for a world where the only actors in your systems were humans, and that's just not the case anymore.
That's right. And to be fair, like the gap has come on pretty fast. The gap's not in the philosophy of how we keep things and data and our employees safe and our companies safe. It's in the layer where agents operate. The good news, though, is that you already know how to fix this because you've been doing it for humans for decades. So the principles I'm going to cover, visibility, identity, policy, cost, and governance, these are definitely not foreign concepts. You've been applying them to humans for years, to service accounts, to third-party vendors, to contractors with scoped access. An AI agent is in the same category of the problem. It's an entity acting on your systems on someone's behalf with a defined scope of authority. The difference is one of scale and speed, because humans have natural limits. They get tired. They can only do one thing at a time well, and most of them pause before doing something that could get them fired or in big trouble. An agent has none of those friction points. It can chain actions across dozens of systems in milliseconds without hesitation, without that human judgment. So the blast radius isn't a person making a mistake. It's an autonomous agent doing exactly what it thinks it was told, and really when no one's watching. So this is a new urgency, and I'm going to walk you through exactly how to apply what you already know to this new class of actor. So here's a 5-part framework. First 4 parts of the framework involve the who and the what, and the last one's the how. Each one maps to something you already know how to think about. You've applied versions of these to your infra, your networks, and your human workforce. We're going to apply them to the agent, that new actor. And you don't have to do all 5 at once, but you got to start somewhere. So let's walk through each one. The first step bears the question, do you know what's actually running? So right now, most organizations don't. Employees are connecting AI agents, Claude, ChatGPT, Cursor, GitHub, Copilot, some of them sanctioned, some of them not. They're connecting these things to internal systems through things like MCP integrations that they can set up themselves, or they're already baked into the tools. And before you can govern anything, you need to be able to see everything. And visibility doesn't mean that you're reading, every one of your employees' prompts. You don't need to see what they're asking. You need to see that a call was made, to which model, through which route, on whose behalf, as well as which servers and tools the model is calling when it tries to perform that task at hand. And that distinction matters for trust. And trust is what makes governance something that employees accept rather than resent. Now that you can see what's running, you need to know who is behind it. So every request hitting an AI system or app in your environment should be tied to something, a user, a team, a role, a service account, an agent. That identity should flow through your existing IDP. It's not a new system. It's an extension of identity governance that you've already built. So when an agent makes a request, the answer to the question, like, who is this, should never be, I don't know. It should be that, like this is a sales team CRM agent running under this user's delegation authorized for this scope. This is how you get accountability, because when something does go wrong and it scales, something will definitely go wrong. You need to answer these 3 questions. What agent did this, on whose behalf, and with what authorization? Identity is what actually makes answering those questions possible. So now you see what's running and who's behind it. The third step of the framework is controlling what's actually allowed. This means defining and enforcing the rules before a single request even goes out. Things like which models are approved in your environment, which providers are on your allow list, how sensitive is the data being handled, and defining whether certain categories of information can even be sent to the models or these external tools at all. Think about what this looks like in practice. If your legal team probably shouldn't be sending contract language to a consumer AI endpoint. Your finance team probably shouldn't be routing profit margin data through a model or MCP tool that your security team has not reviewed yet. HR definitely shouldn't have an agent accessing PII fields with no restrictions to what it can do with that PII. Policy is where you define the rules, but defining them definitely is not enough. They have to be enforced even before an execution call goes out, not just after something goes wrong. And here's a step that doesn't usually make it into governance frameworks, but it definitely belongs in yours. And I think that this one is probably becoming even more clear and salient than ever. AI costs money. And unlike most enterprise software, the cost scales directly with usage. Every call, every token you burn, every time an agent runs. In a world where knowledge workers are spinning up their own agents and connecting them to systems, you can quickly end up with a bill that nobody budgeted for and that nobody can really explain. Cost governance means budgets per team, per use case, per agent. It means rate limits that hold in production, not just in theory. It means things like spend caps that alert before they breach and not after. So this is not about being restrictive. It's just being able to say yes to sustainability, because if you can't control what AI costs, you cannot scale it responsibly. And this is where the framework becomes more operational. The first 4 steps, visibility, identity, policy, and cost, they're only as good as your ability to enforce them consistently in real time across every AI interaction in your environment. The gateway is how you do that. One integration point that sits between your AI agents and the models, providers, and tools that they're trying to reach. Every request goes through it. Every request is evaluated in real time against your rules before it goes anywhere. At this layer, everything becomes real and it comes together. Visibility, identity, they're verified on every single call. Policy is enforced before requests go out, and costs are not a surprise at the end of the month, but tracked in real time. Every action is logged. The agent, this agent did something on behalf of this user, made this request at this time, used this model, used these tools, and it was either approved or blocked for a particular reason tied to a policy. So Barndoor offers two solutions for enterprise AI: an LLM gateway that sits in front of every model provider, and MCP governance that sits in front of every MCP server and tool call that an agent makes. Together, they give security teams one control plane for AI. When it comes to credential management, virtual keys, instead of scattered provider credentials. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to folks that are like, yes, we have 20 employees that have 20 MCP servers connected, or are using, are just kind of minting their own keys across Anthropic and OpenAI, and they're just kind of scattered everywhere. Well, you need to solve that with the gateway. Fallback waterfalls that keep workloads running when a provider degrades. Budget caps and rate limits enforced in dollars and tool calls, identity-aware access policies tied to your IDP, and of course, a complete audit trail across both model and tool traffic. This is how enterprises actually should be governing AI. One place to control who can call which models and which MCP servers, how much they can spend, and what the organization is exposed to. But governance, cost control, and observability all assume that content moving through the gateway is acceptable, and none of those controls touch what's actually inside the prompt, the tool call, or the tool output, or the model's response. Barndoor adds a data protection layer that enables enterprises to inspect, transform, block sensitive data at every prompt, tool call, tool response, and answer. The LLM gateway and MCP governance solutions are how you govern AI traffic. You keep it cost predictable, and data protection in the middle is what keeps your data inside safe. So earlier in the presentation, we were talking about how Mark Benioff mentioned, that companies want to become agentic enterprises, and they're trying to give them a path to do that. Well, I believe that there's a holistic path to agentic AI. So when you have this framework in place, you can actually follow a natural path to becoming a truly agentic enterprise. And the first step is just to connect. Give your knowledge workers safe, governed access to your business systems and data. So let them work the way they already want to work, which is probably with some existing AI chat apps. But you have the framework and controls in place. The second step on the path is to build confidence. As employees use AI against the real business context and data, they develop intuition for what AI can and can't do. And through these iterations, IT and security teams get visibility into what's being used, what's not being used, and where there may be gaps, where they might, you might not maybe supply the things that the knowledge worker needs. And these things build trust in both directions when you kind of have that open dialogue going. The third step is to identify unique opportunities and use cases. While you can read all these stories and get great inspiration from, how other companies are doing amazing things with agentic AI, a lot of it could be buzz, and it's rarely a copy and paste situation. Real usage of AI in your data surfaces your highest value agentic and automation candidates, not those theoretical ones. In this phase, you'll also discover what should be agentic and benefits from inference versus what should be non-agentic. Maybe perhaps task calls that could be, that are call for something that's more deterministic than non-deterministic. The use cases worth building, like when it comes to agentic solutions, they're just going to reveal themselves naturally. And the last step is to really build and iterate as a team, not in silos. Despite the fact that people can do a lot of these things on their own, with proven use cases, clear governance, and organizational buy-in in place, the leap to agentic AI should not be a leap of faith. It should be a series of controlled steps that's built on trust and focused on business value. And you really need to do these things as a team. All right, I'm going to hand it back to Vivian to close us out.
Thanks, Neil. And I know we had indicated in our invitations that this webinar is only 30 minutes. We just really want to give folks a very succinct, clear path versus giving you guys a lot of information. But Neil and I are here to hang out. If folks have any questions, please send them to us through chat or through the through the questions area. So please, it's not too late. We're happy to hang out here for a little bit. So, as you're thinking of your questions, we covered a lot of ground in the last 30 minutes. And I think the thing that matters most here is you don't have to have this all figured out before you start. So as Neil indicated, just start. The organizations that are going to get this right aren't the ones who waited until they had perfect policies set up. They're the ones who got visibility first and extended what they already knew and built from there. So if today gave you a framework to walk into that conversation with your CEO or your board members and say yes to AI on your terms, then hopefully we did our job today in the last 30 minutes. And so if you want to see how Barndoor actually operationalizes this framework, all the visibility, identity, policy enforcement, cost controls, all of that, we'd love to show you. You can book a demo directly with our team. The link is on your screen to the right, and I will also drop that in the chat here. And in terms of the webinar recording, everything will be recorded, so these will be shared with you as well. And as I was talking, Neil, we did have a question pop up around I guess the MCP versus CLI debate. Is MCP
Yes.
dead? What about MCP versus CLI? So
Yeah. Is MCP dead? That's kind of a funny joke. Well, there's a I think it was probably brought on by OpenClaw, where there was quite a lot of popularity in terms of CLI, command line interface tools. The fact of the matter is that CLI tools these are like very engineering kind of tools, right? They're intended on, you paste in API keys, you have to, maybe create an OAuth app back on like Azure or the Google Cloud Platform in order to actually make these things work. They're great developer tools, right? They're very technical. They're not necessarily built for like enterprise scale in terms of like rolling out a whole bunch of integrations with your across your whole knowledge worker base. If you do find that, I would highly recommend that's something that you do want to kind of get under control, because it's really easy. CLI tools, or even MCPs for that matter, you can just ask Claude Code to do it for you, or ask OpenClaw to do it, and it'll make the connection for you. Kind of bringing it back to what I was talking about before. But when it comes to about the ease, but when it comes to the governance and control and visibility, you do not get that with CLI tools, but you definitely can get that with MCP and using a gateway.
Yeah. And then we had another question come across. So in terms of like overhead, I guess maybe this person is asking like cost overhead, but maybe implementation overhead. How much overhead in general does agentic governance actually add? So I'm assuming like a solution like Barndoor, and what will be asked of the team.
So I mean, I think that on the LLM side, you might get questions about like performance overhead, or maybe with an MCP gateway too. It's nominal. I mean, it's if we're talking about that, but in terms of like from a like implementation standpoint, it eases a lot, because what you do have is that centralized governance. So instead of just everybody connecting, let's say, taking all of their AI clients and apps and connecting it to themselves and kind of OAuthing on their own into Salesforce or into Slack, you do it through a gateway. And Barndoor, in our case, we're like a token broker, right? So all of that stuff is centrally managed and has that visibility, and you just don't have like configuration sprawl across all of your employees trying to do it in their own special way. So back to the very first part of the framework of kind of knowing what's running, I think that's a really good step first to kind of see, like, if you have not taken accounting of how things are spread across your company in terms of how employees have implemented AI, when you do take that inventory, you're going to see that it's an absolute hot mess. There's going to be configuration files and keys just laying everywhere. And so to kind of rein all of that in, it actually reduces overhead quite a bit.
Yeah, thanks, Neil.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, thanks, folks, for hanging out with me and Neil for an extra few minutes and for your questions. we're going to close things out here unless folks have other questions. And really, Neil, any final thoughts before we adjourn?
Yeah, I'm a developer, so if you head over to Barndoor, it was just a quick aside. We always have this ability for people to kind of like, they can get a demo, but there's also this idea that you can. A lot of this stuff, if you have an advanced team, it's very self-serve. So I was just on a call with somebody that a new customer of ours where they onboarded very, very quickly, like even beyond like the speed and velocity we thought. So it's one of those things where if you just want to get hands-on with Barndoor and give it a whirl, I highly encourage that too. So that you don't feel like you have to, as if there's some big long cycle behind this in order to try to get started. It's a very it would be almost counterintuitive if it were difficult to implement something like this with how easy things are to implement these days when it comes to AI, and then your employees are already doing. So that's my parting note is just kind of get your hands on and start playing with Barndoor.
Absolutely. Thanks, Neil. And thank you, everyone. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, and thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.